Welcome to Full Metal RPG. I'm Richie Buzzkill, and on this fine Sunday afternoon, as like we like to do, I've helped bring together. Actually, Matt came to me to talk about some stuff, and we kind of came up with a topic we'll get to eventually. Hey, Matt, or from Wet Ink Games, what's up?
Hey, not much. We're doing great. I, I, I'm from Wet Ink Games. My name's Matthew Orr. I'm the creative director at Wet Ink Games. We just finished a funding campaign. We've got another book at the printer. We're getting ready to go to PAX Unplugged. It's a busy time.
Yeah, it is that busy time of year where everyone is the world got busier, and we also have to all work as well. So, but glad to have you on, Matt. And then Dan, my old friend Noland, is on here. What's up, Dan? Noland.
Not much. Getting ready for Thanksgiving, hanging out. We had finished your short mini campaign last night
Yeah,
at our Saturday night game. That was good.
my not expanse game, Delta V. So
Using old Weston game.
yeah,
He's got
Star
air
Wars.
quotes, everybody that's on audio.
yeah. I tried to audibly do quote unquote not the expanse. Yeah, with West, strangely enough, with Weston Star Wars first edition, because it was the least complicated space game that still gave me enough granularity to make it work.
No, it was fun. We should talk about it at some later point. That's not the topic for today.
Yeah, no, that's not the topic. Matt, can you brought this topic, and I love this topic. So can you give me an intro to this topic?
Yeah. So partly because I like the show, and partly because I'm interested in self-promotion, I said, "Hey, you got a spot? I want to talk." And Richie said, "What kind of topics do you want to say?" And one of them that I threw out was like the use of art in role-playing games. Like, and for me, what we always say at my business partner, Brandon Aiton, and I, like what we always say is that the art on the cover of your book has to be good enough that somebody wants to pick up the book. And so like that's its job. And so that's kind of like where, and that I work in such indie game space where art is always expensive, but it's there's so many indie games that they try to not buy a good cover, not put out the product doesn't look great sitting on the shelf. It looks fine, but if you've got a great cover, somebody's going to pick up that book first, when they're looking at the options that are in front of you. And so that's kind of like one way into the topic, but of course there's lots of ways to talk about art in role-playing games, especially as a maker of them, like I am, and but consumers of art, like art itself becomes a reason to have the book if the art is good enough. You may never play the game, but you can't get rid of that book because the art is so good,
Right.
or something like that. There's a lot of ways to approach the topic, but that's kind of the that was the topic. Like, hey, art in games, like
Yeah.
that's something that
And we here
I'm all about.
Yeah, we here at Full Metal RPG have always been huge art nerds. Like that's kind of like, going back to Brendan and Adam, they're both kind of artists in their own right, and they just love, I mean, we
Sure.
all kind of fell in love with a certain aesthetic in the 90s, and we really like the black ink kind of aesthetic of Broad Street and some of those guys. But like all kinds of art has really brought the whole world of RPGs has really been brought up quite a few notches over the years, with crowdfunding being able to afford more art for smaller games. Because back in the day, if you had a heartbreaker, you were just writing your own game, right? It was going to be, okay, I can maybe get my brother who does a little sketch to put it on the cover, right? And that's a certain aesthetic.
Well,
Like a lot of people love that, like
but
old school.
I mean,
Renaissance.
to be fair to the cool crowd, right? I mean, that's what D&D first edition was. You're like, hey, this teen can draw. Let me put this sketch in the book.
Yeah,
Don't
except
make it look too much like Superman.
he can trace over some images in a comic book, but that was a it was a whole
That's
that's a whole problem that they figured out later. Anyways,
Well, he reskinned them after he traced.
yeah, he did change them, but there's still some problems with that. But we are not necessarily going to pick on the original D&D as much as we should. But it's more about art forward games,
no, I just mean
right?
that like it started as an indie game, which had a problem. Like, how do you get good art when you're just starting out in the industry? It's a problem that even back to the origins has been a problem. That's all I was trying to say.
Yeah, because essentially these are textbooks, to be honest. Like they're instruction manuals, right? They have that's the least sexiest version of any kind of book, except we have seen a great reskinning of there'll be the innovation of the having the story in the front like the old White Wolf books did, and then having like an evocative cover and evocative art brings it to a place where you're like, oh no, I'm attached to this thing now. Like, even though I want to own this because I'm attached to it, right?
Yeah, to my mind, the goals of designing a RPG book are like completely over constrained. Like there's just too many things you got to achieve with a book, right? It's like RBK said, it's like a technical manual, like to teach you how to do a thing, right? It's got a whole world building piece that you got to try and like suck people into the world. It's kind of a, like you said about the cover, like it's a sales or persuasive essay kind of thing about like convince you to buy this thing, right? And you also want it to be like a beautiful artistic object, and like you're working towards like all these goals at once. But I do really think art can help you move on a lot of these front, even as much as the technical manual, like people do wayfinding in these books. Like they find the page they're looking for, like, oh, the place with the armor classes is like, by the picture of the dragon or whatever, right?
Oh yeah,
world building
absolutely.
World building is obviously like hugely improved by illustrations of, oh, what's this fantastical world look like, help me visualize it, right? We already went over like the sales and persuasive piece of it. There's just being able to pick up that cover and flip through a book and be like, oh, this is just beautiful, I gotta own this. And yeah, and art for its own sake is another piece there. Yeah, so I think the kind of art heavy design like is trying to square that circle of achieving the gajillion goals that an RPG book has that are just difficult to fill all at once, and art's a big tool in your yeah, a tool you have there to try and get all that done.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking of all the other things that you named. Like I said earlier, like I usually think of the cover as just like that's your sales pitch, right? So if the cover gets you to pick up the book, and then you put a description on the back of the book that's sort of that you get like one paragraph to describe the setting and why they should own this book, and then if that does its job, then you open the book, and then the art and the design in the book and the content, whatever as they flip through, that's the clincher to the sales. But like the first step of that chain is getting people to stop and notice the book. So, but yeah, the book as a whole is doing all the other things that you said too, which is, it is quite a feat it's amazing that anyone achieves any success at all. It's very hard.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot nowadays, like most people encounter, especially the games we all like, first on like a Kickstarter page or on some sort of web pages, like pre-ordering, backing it, and having that art ahead of time has got to be very expensive, right? But you don't know if you're going to be able to, you think you're going to be able to pay for this. So you're laying a lot of money out of pocket to be able to attract people to just get the book made, right? So
I mean, it works. It can work multiple ways. Our first book that we did as Wet Ink Games was basically like a bunch of favors from artist friends that Brandon had built a bunch of relationships with these artist people that he knew were like, hey, will you do like one piece for me and I'll pay you later, if with the Kickstarter money, right? And they're all like, sure, buddy, whatever, I trust you to like actually through for me, even if this doesn't work out, right? But that is an unusual case because Brandon had those relationships because he'd worked. They were all. I don't think it's not like it's a secret. Like basically every artist that was in our first book also worked for Palladium Games, and Brandon was a big Palladium Games person. He'd spent his summers doing internships up there, so like he knew all of those people, and he worked for Palladium at Gen Con for years, so he would hang out with artists all day long. And so he's like, hey, I'm doing a new thing, let me have some art, do it up front, we'll pay you later. And they said yes. And so like our Kickstarter part of it, we were able to promote the book with those images that we were able to finagle from some people through personal relationships. But yeah, like once you kind of get enough success, you have to pay the people up front, which is, but that's I guess, it's you don't have to buy everything. You don't have to buy all the art up front. Like you can get one good cover piece or one, this is what we want the game to be about kind of piece, and then the rest of it can come later when the funding comes through. You could do it. It all depends on, yeah, when you put in the money, right?
Right.
Are you paying yourself back with the Kickstarter, or are you actually getting the money to buy the art with the Kickstarter? Like it depends on the project and what you're trying to do.
Right. And like we have a lot of great fans who happen to be very artistic, and I sort of have a similar thing. I'm wearing my Wolf Mungus Full Metal RPG t-shirt today, but like I go to them to ask, to be like, hey man, can I like buy a piece of art from you? Like it's really, the t-shirts are my my small window into this world of buying art for a thing. And it I've had mixed success. Like my good friends and the good fans, they'll be like, yeah, well, I'll do it for that amount. Sure, here's a piece of art, or here, I don't want you to pay me, here, have a piece of art, right? Which is great, but also like there's this weird moment where I'm approaching someone that may not know about it or is extremely busy, and like I don't know what to I don't know what to give them, and I have a very limited budget, so if I feel like that's that very much that cover art kind of thing. It's like, I would like a piece of art from you. Would you do it for this amount? And they may say yes, but what they actually mean is no. It's weird sometimes dealing with some of these artists just randomly approaching them on the internet. I find it to be disheartening sometimes, but also amazing when it comes through. So
Sure. And of course, artists got to get paid. Like, we have, they want to get paid. So, artists want to work, but they want to get paid. So, for their work. So you have to pay them at some point. And I think that is, sometimes you can leverage that like personal connection to get a piece for that you wouldn't normally be able to afford. And sometimes it's the piece, getting a yes at all is the favor. Like we had a piece for the cover of the box for one of our games that like for Jiangxi Blood in the Banquet Hall. That cover is by Kwanchai Moria, who is a legend in the like cover art for board games type industry. And we were not able to call him and ask him at any price. We do not have his number, but one of the designers of the game does have his number. And so he's like, hey, I'm going to ask Kwanchai. And Kwanchai said yes, because of that personal connection between the designer and the artist. And of course, we still had to pay his price, but it was the personal connection that allowed the call to be made at all, which is sort of another level of that whole thing. And that cover is amazing. If you haven't, I mean,
No,
I don't know if you're going to do like click on the links or whatever, but
yeah,
like cover is truly stunning.
yeah, it is a truly stunning
Piscotch is a great
cover.
artist.
It is sitting on my shelf over here. It is a beautiful cover.
I
It is
appreciate that.
definitely very evocative and will definitely pull you into this interesting world of a Chinese family restaurant haunted by a vampire.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's yeah. As is its job. That is its job
yeah,
to pull in that to pull you in.
yeah, and that's really, I mean, if it, you're taking, because there is that thought of like, okay, my game is amazing, right? But then I got to get somebody to look at it, and that's really kind of
Right.
the difficulty. But and there's also like there's things where, I mean, I think there's a couple examples I can think of. One of your games, Never Going Home, and Tales from the Loop, where the art came first, right? Where you found
Hmm.
the artist, and there was the art existed, and then there was a game made for it, right?
Yes. Yes. That is what happened with the first Never Going Home book.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting space because like finding some evocative art, because when you're prepping for a session, this is what game masters have been doing since the internet existed, or even just like pulling comic books off of their shelf or whatever, and going, oh, I really like this piece, I'm going to use it in this space, to show this is what I want to the players to see, and I'm going to describe it, but then I'm going to show them this piece, and that's going to raise it, right? So it's the
Mm.
same thing where you're like, you know, uh, so were you? I'm gonna ask about Never Going Home because like,
Sure.
was this like a browsing of the internet? How did the art kind of come to your attention, as it were?
I'm trying to remember. I can't remember exactly which came first. I know that Charles Ferguson Avery, who did the art for Never Going Home, he's done all the art for it so far. Um, he was known to us already, and so as soon as he started posting a series of World War I horror pictures, we were aware of it because we were already following his work. Um, and I can't remember how I actually met him. I think again, Brandon working at the Palladium booth. I think Charlie came to the Palladium booth to say like, "Hey, I'm a new artist. I want to work for you. Here's some art." And so we became aware of him that way because he met Brandon at that time. And um, quite coincidentally, a book that Brandon and I wrote for Palladium ended up having some Charlie illustrations in it, but that wasn't like our decision at all. But it was sort of like one of his one of his first ins in the industry was ended up being a book that we had written for Palladium. Um, but it was like immediate. Like as soon as he started posting that World War I art, those haunted gas mask eyes and the like creepy monsters in the trenches and stuff like that, we're like, oh, Charlie, this is a game. Like, what is the game that goes with this thing? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I thought maybe would do a graphic novel or something. And I'm like, well, how about we license it right now and we're going to start working on a game right now because this is amazing. And I mean, he did a whole after he did it as a Inktober project, so it was all original to that. And then he took those images and made a art book out of it, and so it was called World War Occult, and you can still buy that original art project on his website. He's at Itch Feral Indie Studios is the brand that he works with. That's his brand that he operates under, but it's so you can still get his original art book but then all of those images, then we put in the rule book of Never Going Home. And of course, we've commissioned a ton more since then that aren't in the book because we've done a bunch of books for the Never Going Home setting. But yeah, it was immediate as far as like the licensing thing. It was like, this is a game. There's a game here. We can make a game out of these images, which is maybe not how games usually get done. I don't know, but that's how we have worked a few times where we're like, oh, this art is amazing. We will build a game around this art.
Yeah, and that's a
And even
different way of approaching it, right? So it's the you have an idea and you're like, okay, now I got to find some artist, right? And finding that right artist that kind of evokes that idea that you have, right? And then working with them to try and bring that idea to life, because that's kind of what images inside these books do, is they bring this textbook to life. I'm assuming it's a interesting process to get that kind of to get that working relationship to work out that way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't yeah, it is different. Obviously different things. You work in different ways with different people, and um obviously you're licensing a body of art, and in the case with Never Going Home, like, okay, so we're going to take the World War Occult project and we want a bunch more in that same style, which Charles has been able to deliver perfectly well because he's quite capable. um it's so like his pieces that were original are like his, and we can't, those are, but those are the ones that set the tone originally. But then, like, as the game is developed, we can commission like more extreme versions or less extreme versions of what he was working on originally, because those are then the inspiration is going the other way, where we're like, hey, we've got this, these are the monsters, please draw them, as opposed to here's the images, you make a stat block. Like, it's sort of managing both directions. There's a different relationship with the artist in each case, where
I want to
yeah,
kind
I
of
don't know if
talk.
that was a great answer.
No,
I don't know if that was a great answer.
it was a
Sorry.
great answer. But I
Yeah.
want to go back to a kind of the great grandfathers of this kind of idea, because there was the Planescape and Dark Sun boxes
Mm.
back in the late 80s, early 90s, being all the art done by one artist, Brahm and Diatelli. Those to me are like the great grandsires of this idea of an art driven RPG, because they're just D&D box sets, right?
And being an old person from that era, like just the like tonal shift from like Larry Elmore style stuff you'd seen for like years and years and years, and then suddenly this Brahm Dark Sun box set's like, whoa, what is this? Like, it's totally different. Yeah.
Changing a direction of a thing so radically with an artist can, even though technically if you just look at what's on the page, like, yes, no, those are radical settings, but they're not particularly out of the idiom of Dungeons and Dragons. But having that art just do a 90-degree corner from the classical kind of fantasy art of the mid 20th century to this like more dark oils, or even this kind of like sketch and watercolor style, like, that can really change the entire feel of a game, right? And there'd just be deeply devoted people to that vibe, as the kids say, last year or the year before.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole thing. Like, I think if you're going to come up with a new rule set or a new twist on a thing, but then you get the same art, like, again, as we've all said a couple times, like that initial blush of like what you see, the art is so powerful in that, for that purpose. And so to do a radical departure from the look of the game signals that, like, and what you get inside is also going to be different. And I think that the two can work together in that way, to like, you want to give the cover that says what is in the book, because it's doing that marketing, like you said, Nolan.
Yeah. So I was interested in kind of maybe popping up a level of abstraction and uh thinking about like how when you're approaching art in a book, there's been this big success of Mork Borg and similar things where it's like it's almost an art
Mm.
book first and a role-playing game kind of second. And I don't want to slam on anything in particular, but I think some, games might have taken the wrong lesson from that you don't layout doesn't matter, like
Well,
readability doesn't matter. We just slap stuff everywhere. Uh, and but how do you approach, you know, how you're going to balance the goals of art in a book, like as you develop it? What are you think? What's going through your head at the kind of the abstract level of just like, what are my goals here? What is, um, because obviously you could have lots of artistic goals, right? So
Sure.
I was curious how you think through that.
You for me specifically, like as uh, you know, again, Brandon and I work together on a lot of this, so his opinion might be slightly different, but like um, we usually it is sort of like I think a lot of the art is for us, especially like once you get past the cover. The cover is like sort of the most distillated, that's not a word, the most distilled version of what the book is trying to do, right? Because that's the cover is what's going to be on the Kickstarter page. It's what people are going to see on the shelf. It's what people are going to see on Drive Through RPG. Like they're going to see the cover. So like it has to be the most evocative. But inside, I like for the art to show a diversity of what is happening in the game. So we usually have, when I write out my art commissions for what I want in the book or where I'm looking for, if we're doing in a licensing situation, we're going to license this piece for this purpose. So like I want to see like equipment, I want to see stuff fighting, I want to see somebody like taking some downtime, I want to see like a couple monsters, because those are the elements that are going to be in the book. So like give me what that looks like in this game. So whether that's I know we worked with an artist named Steve who he wrote and did all the art for one of our books, Tenebria, the Remnant of Rome, a Remnant of Rome, which is it's set right after the fall of the Roman Empire, and you're in Germania as like a Roman legion, but the Romans are gone. So like, what are you going to do now? Is like you've got to build a city in the middle of nowhere and develop your own support structure and stuff like that. So we asked, I mean, he was drawing a ton of art uh, to set those evocative scenes, aqueducts and soldiers and like guys in armor and barbarian type people. But then we were like, okay, so, but we also need to see like somebody injured, because there's going to be a page that talks about how you recover from injury and what happens if your character dies. So he drew like a graveyard for that page. And again, fitting the images to the he did like a group, not a group portrait, but like a bunch of people standing in a crowd, as like that was on the character creation page, because you're going to be, again, like that's the art that goes with that page, is like seeing a bunch of different people, and then across from it is like, now create your own character. It is sort of like that's the needs of the book, because it does, it's like you were saying, Richie, with the textbook nature of it. It's like that reinforcement, right? So like you're going to have the group of characters is going to be on the page with character creation, and that's because that's what makes sense. That's what it is. Or you're going to have the picture of the injured character on the healing page, again, because that's what goes together in the layout.
yeah, and that's you're creating these landmarks, like what Noland was saying, is like this is the
Mm-hmm.
page about health. It's got a guy with a wound or a bandage over a wound or something like that, that like is very evocative of that subject, that brings you're like, oh yeah, that's the page we need to get to. And that's where, like, a lot of times I kind of rag on PDFs a lot, because I mean I would be lost without my tablet, but like for all the PDFs, but like flipping through a book quickly, you can go, oh, that's the injury page, right? Whatever that piece of art is, if it's evocative of the subject of the page, it makes it so much quicker to find that page. But to Nolan's point about yes, I believe that there are masters of the art book as RPG book. There are masters of the subject, like Morkborg and Cyborg and those from those games.
Yeah, I definitely didn't mean to slam on them.
But they're masters.
Some of the imitators. Yeah.
But the imitators, the people that are making books for these subjects, yes, you can do this thing where you have this sloppy layout, but you have to be kind of a master to get loose with something, right? It's if you're if you're not a master, but like good in your craft, you have to know sloppy, right?
You have to know the rules before you can break the rules.
Right.
I think is another way to an often said thing that communicates that same idea.
And any piece of art, right, or any art is like that. Like once you learn composition and colors and how to lay out a thing or take a photograph such that the horizon is in the lower third or the upper third in order to see the whether you're seeing so much sky or so much land, to make it evocative of a certain place in a certain time, then you can go, oh yeah, no, I want the landscape to be tilted because there's this weird mine that's it's mined, but the mine is kind of at this weird angle, so that's the subject of this picture. You have to do that kind of layout, to do that kind of art in a book where you've got like whoever did the Dread cover is someone. It doesn't work unless you like look at it in person, because it's just a bloody thumbprint on the cover that says Dread, until you see the back of the book. And then you go, wait a minute, if I grab this with my left hand, my hand is literally leaving a bloody handprint. It is one of my favorite covers of all time but it doesn't work now because that's just not how you would sell the game unless you put like a bloody handprint on as like your thing on your Kickstarter, right? But it worked for that time and place because the first place you're going to find that is either on the indie press revolution thing at Gen Con, or you're going to find it at some bookstore and you're going to pull it off the shelf and you're going to go, oh wait, this is amazing, right?
Yeah. I'm looking for a picture and I got a lot of irrelevant 2000 AD
There you go.
here. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's got a thumbprint right there, and then
and then you just grab it with your left hand.
Yeah, if you pick it up, it looks like you've left a bloody
handprint on it, and it's it doesn't work as a PDF. It just doesn't. So that's the kind of thing that
right, and that's
good.
No, you can finish. I was jumping in. It's an exciting topic.
Yeah, so that's the thing you got to. I feel like people need to think about if they're going to do one of these art books, right? Is it has to work as a PDF, and it has to work because when you're doing all these colors, these weird colors in the background, and like never put a texture behind a thing of text, because it literally it works on the screen because you're backlit, but when you print it out, like it obscures because there's so much visual noise on it. You can't. This was a huge flaw in a lot of 90s books, is people would have a texture over the entire, because they learned the wrong lesson from White Wolf games where they had like a border and some textures, very light textures in the background, where a lot of people just put a straight texture in the background and you would just not be able to read the black text over the gray texture kind of thing. So that's kind of where I was going with that.
I think one thing that what you've just said, I completely agree with what you're talking about. And what it makes me think of is sort of like the different, it's almost like, and I don't know that anyone has, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe people have, but like, I can think of maybe some side examples, but what I'm thinking of is like, it is sort of like the internet was supposed to eliminate books, but it totally hasn't. But one of the responses has been that like books have become these art objects, so that like you're talking about the bloody handprint, or even a copy of Morkborg, Like it is an art object in and of itself, separate from any other use that the book may have. And that is sort of like prestige books in that way, that like they are valuable products to experience in the real world because so much of our world is digital screens, and you don't get that textile, or you don't get that textual interaction. Tech, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean
No,
that's Bluebeard's Bride. That's lovely.
yeah.
But
Bluebeard's
then
Bride and all those games they have, you cannot experience them because in unless you're holding them in person, because they've got like silver leaf or gold leaf or some kind of like holographic
right,
thing going on, or the texture of the paper. I mean, it is very bibliophile, right? It's very much like playing into the problem of like, I have a giant thing of books behind me, right? It's like my bookshelf is overflowing with all these books because I love these kind of books, but realistically I should just have everything on a tablet.
right.
Like,
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm sure my shelf is over that way, so I can't point to it. But like, yeah, it is. Books are, there is a certain amount of like, this is good enough that I want to have it in the real world, not just in digital. But and so there's a whole other train that we can get on and go down on that kind of thing. But like talking about the layout stuff, there's almost like it's like opportunities to, but it's stuff you have to think about. Like, yeah, it's like certain pages become unreadable because you want to do a crazy layout. But if you're in the digital, but digital also lets you kind of, it's a different product, so it has to be customized in a different way, or can be customized in a different way. You can make a PDF that does all kinds of things, that changes the readability of the text, or that has slider bars and options. I mean, it's a digital program. You can do stuff with it that you can't do with a book, and it's a different medium in that respect. And so you get the bloody handprint that fits your hand when you're holding the book in real life, but then in the digital realm, I can't read this font. I'm going to change the font. I select options, change font to this thing, and now I can read the book, because it's a different, it offers you different things. You're effectively producing multiple products in that case, rather than just printing out a PDF or digitizing a book. There are different mediums that can be designed to be used optimally in different ways.
well, and it's really about
So
the inclusive and I'm trying to think of the word and I'm failing. But the ability to adjust to disability, accessibility, yes, the accessibility of the product,
yeah,
right? Some PDFs can allow, if you do your PDF right, you can make it so a screen reader can read it to someone and have it so that the text is selectable, so that because you can make a PDF that's just literally image after image after image, and it's a very flat thing, but it becomes not very useful, right? You can't search it, right? The ability to have the ability to search something at the table, so you can be like, oh wait, wound counter, thing, and it just comes up. Oh, it's on page 35, right? Is an amazing
right,
ability, but when you're dealing, sometimes screens can make things harder to read because the way the contrast or whatever, or the colors, where that's where a book comes in handy, is you're able to have this thing and have it in a good light and not backlit, so you can actually see something.
yeah. It makes me think of, it's like like comic books come up this way, where it's like, what is the real version of the comic book, right? So like the real version of the comic book, especially back in the days before digital first and stuff like that, the real version of the comic book was the one that was printed in those 4 colors of ink and sent out to people on newsprint. Like and so the art doesn't look like that. Even if it's drawn by Jack Kirby himself, it doesn't look quote unquote right, because it's not printed on newsprint by a 4-color ink process, like that is. And so like it's a similar, that's a hyperbolic example, whatever, but I'm bringing in that idea that like, what is the real item that you're really making? Are you making a printed book? Are you making a searchable PDF? Like, what is the real RPG in that case? Because it isn't optimized. You can only optimize it for one format. So where is it the real thing?
Yeah, when you're
And
releasing
with
in multiple media, you're definitely facing that challenge of, am I taking all the time in the world to optimize each one for each separate, or am I actually going to finish this project and choose one to optimize for?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing where
right. I mean, that's the challenge.
I'm doing this show is released in audio form and in a video form. And it turns out when I started doing video, I can't do all of the uhs cuts out, right? Because it would look weird. And it really helped me shorten my process cycle time. So figuring out which one you're going to optimize to,
hey, bonus.
it was a definite bonus, let me tell you. Because I'm no longer begging for an editor. But I feel like that's the same thing with, like, I mean, as my bookshelves become more and more overflowing, like I tend to maybe start looking, well, can I just do with the PDF on this product or not? And so yeah, you're right. It's a completely different product from a usability standpoint, for sure.
So since this is Full Metal RPG,
Mm-hmm.
Can I drag us out into the deep water for a minute?
Of course, of course.
All right. So we talked about like all the value of art in terms of like instrumental use. Like, okay, it helps us find our place. It helps us sell our book. It helps us do all these. It has these functional uses and real life, and how we use our RPG. But is there an intrinsic value of art, like art for art's sake, in an RPG? What is its purpose, rather than like these goals it can achieve for us? And I get this is weird philosophy thing, but this is Full Metal RPG. Let's go out into the deep water for at least a few minutes.
Yeah. I think that there is an intrinsic value to it, because I mean, like, just think about like all that art that was lost in the 80s when they shut down TSR, like, or 90s when they shut down TSR. There was just whole swaths of art that they kept everything, and then there was just like thrown away, and those pieces now go for tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? But there's also the intrinsic value of just sparking the imagination, because that's all this manual and all this art. It really is about sparking the imagination of the players. That includes the GM, because the GM is a player. Thank you very much. Anyways, there's my soapbox for the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, yeah, I definitely think art in an RPG can make you feel something. And I think that's, if art's for anything, it's, to make you feel or notice something. And, when you pick up Bluebeard's Bride or, 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, or all these different, beautiful art books, and they, match the theme of what they're trying to achieve artistically to the visual art in the thing, it brings you in, it makes you feel something. I think it's valuable. I think it has its own intrinsic purpose.
I mean,
I absolutely agree. I pulled up some books here that I think have showcased like exactly what you're talking about, like bring you in the system. And when you say like, is there any of the art that is inherently valuable? Like there's a book I have here that it's called Wayfaring Strange. If you can see on the video here, it is like roadmap size, like triptych layout size, which is an unusual choice for a role-playing game, but very much apt, because what it's about is about like traveling the spooky roads in the back roads of the United States, and like a magical being, and so you're hiding out in all those things. you're hiding out in truck stops and stuff like that, and it's got these photo manipulated, and I don't know how well it's going to come through on any sort of video, but they look almost like woodcuts, but they're like the writer of the book is also the person who did all this photo manipulation stuff, and like they've put together this matching thing where it's like here's a picture of a bunch of diners and roadways and people you might meet on the road in this travel guide to the setting, and it perfectly matches. It's very evocative, very evocative. Like, you know what this game is about literally as soon as you flip through it. You're like, oh yeah, I get it. I get the tone. I know what it's about.
It's got
but it also looks great.
Yeah, it's got a VW bus on the cover. The logo looks very much like a old diner off the Route 66 or something logo,
or a hotel or something.
Yeah, a hotel. I picked up a game called Torque, which is like it's in the shape of an old car manual. It's got that same size and shape of a car manual, and it's about like this post-apocalyptic racing league, and it's faded. It looks very much like you just pulled a car out of a barn and you pulled this manual out of the glove box kind of thing. So there's this like kind of like what Apple used to do, where the icon looked like a record, right? Or there is this philosophy of making the book look like an object from that world, or invoking that world to this point where it could have come from it, right?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a whole other thing. Like I definitely I subscribe to that. Like I always want obviously I know my own games best, but like like Never Going Home it's got like a paper texture printed inside, and it's like watermarked and dog-eared, are like they're just part of what is printed on the page, so that when you look at it, it looks like someone's old journal from the war in which they drew these sketches of these monsters in. I mean, it's not like we didn't go to like 1,000-Year-Old Vampire levels of that kind of stuff, but that is what we were trying to evoke, a little bit of that like it is an object from the world. It is a soldier from the war in which these monsters were described, these things were seen. So yeah, it is a whole. I mean, that brings in like the layout artist and a whole other set of talents, other than just like commissioning, hey, give me a 4-inch by 6-inch thing at 140 or a 450 DPI, and whatever. It's a whole other. Putting it all together is a whole other skill.
Right, because there are many artisans that put together these books that we love, right? There's the ones that are most the writer and the artists on the cover, but there's the layout artist, there's the people that do the indexes, and there's an art to a good index. There's an art to making sure that the column spacing and everything is very readable. Like, if you've ever like written a thing and then tried to, I'm just going to throw this in a 2-column layout, and then tried to read it, it's terrible. It is so goddamn terrible. Let me tell you, as Noland and I have actually participated in some
indie game
jam things, trying to do the layout was kind of like, oh shit.
Turns out this is a lot of work and it's hard.
Yeah. It's like, this looks like garbage. Oh crap. So
yeah, I've got another one here that is in 2-column, but it is broken up by a lot of like tables and like side boxes and pieces of art. So it is just 2 columns forever is not going to win, but it could work out okay.
Well, what were you holding? I don't know what you were holding.
This is the other one. Capers by Nerdburger Games is another one. Is the one I was holding up, but it is laid out in 2 columns. You were bragging on 2 columns, so I thought I'd check.
No, I like a 2-column, but you've got to do it just right, or otherwise it doesn't work.
Right.
He's saying there's an art to 2 columns.
There's a portrait on like three of these in this spread of 4 columns. There's 3 of them have character portraits in them, so it's not just block of text after block of text.
Right.
And this is the page I was looking at. You've got like an illustration. You got like over here. You got like a list that's bulleted, and then you've got these section headers that break it all up. So
Right.
it's very readable.
Right.
But yeah, it's an art to get to that point.
It's definitely an art.
It turns out the human eye gets really tired after looking at doing the exact same pattern for so long, and that's why you need things that break up. And that's part of what art's job is, to like break up the picture,
Absolutely.
the page, so that you get
Absolutely.
something evocative to look at it, but it breaks up the page so you're not just looking at a wall of text. So
we have a friend that he dealt with someone, and it's someone on the internet, right? Like, so who knows whether this person was, it was someone on the internet. There's always people on the internet that are going to be upset about stuff. But he wanted to get like a discounted version of this guy's book with no art. Like, I don't need the art. Just send me can I get a cheaper PDF that doesn't have the art in it? And it was like, no, I'm not going to do a new layout for you that takes the art out and then sell it to you for less. Like, that is ridiculous. And yeah, but
look,
anyway,
he could just,
the art is the game.
Yes, effectively, there are games where they're not really much of a game without the art. Like, just like some of these small zines where there's not much in here, but the art is just like, you've got like 5 or 6 pieces of really evocative art with just like a very small game that could, I mean, a lot of games could just fit on a index card, right? It's just, that's the index card. But there's also the fictional art, the writing of fiction that belongs in the world. Like, I can think of a book, Baron Munchausen is a piece of art because it's written like
it really is.
The titular character is telling you, the whole game fits in like 6 lines of text. Like, there's nothing to that game, but the object, the book is so amazing that you're willing to read it. It's the same thing with Apocalypse World. Like, Apocalypse World, I love the black and white art in Apocalypse World, but Vincent and McGay's Bakers, they have this evocative writing, and I know it's a very polarizing opinion, but I love the fact that they're swearing through the entire thing. They're telling you how it is and what but leaving those empty spaces to let you play in. It really does, if you read that book and not just go, oh, this is how this world, it really tells you about the world in a very different way, as well as the black and white
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned like how we've tried to make the Never Going Home look like the Soldier's Journal, but that, what you're just describing, is like, that's like ambition, right? I've never worked on a book that we've gone to that level with, where it's like, no, the entire book really is a object from the world, including like the voice of the character, like there's like a narrator. There's not this omniscient textbook narration. It is like, what's up, cheese bags? I'm here in the bunker on day 79. Like whatever. Like, to make the rule book that way would be amazing. Like, that would be a whole other level of integrating.
Yeah, it's an artistic choice, and yeah, like, I mean, I can see the pros and the cons. Like, you are balancing those goals of, teaching people the game versus having this artistic voice, and like, you got to find a middle somewhere. And yeah, I don't begrudge anybody for making an artistic choice that puts them any place on that spectrum, right?
Right.
You've got both artistic goals, right?
Yeah. So far, most of our books break off like any of those sort of like in-world pieces as like, this is set aside and clearly separate from like the text of the game.
In italics or whatever.
Right. Because to integrate it fully or commit to the bit, so to speak, that takes a lot of commitment.
I mean, it's not really like, the only book I can think of that's totally like that, like even Apocalypse World breaks from it as you read it, right? But like the only Baron Munchausen is probably the only book I can think of. I'm sure there are other books that are like that. And there are books that are from the world that aren't really game books, like the Book of Nod or from White Wolf. You know, those there are books that are from the world that are fictional. That
Yeah, they aren't really a rule book in that case. They're more like a fiction edition for the world. Yeah.
right, and that would be the art. It's like a total art book from that sort of perspective of like, oh, but to integrate rules into that idea is very, very difficult to get that right. And I totally understand why that's a very rare thing. But it's very interesting when you run across like those, like somebody's telling you a first person narrative is like bringing you through the world, or even just those evocative stories that are in the front of the books, kind of in that White Wolf tradition of like, you read the book, the story out of the front of the Vampire the Masquerade book, and it's just like you immediately get this world in a few pages, right? And then you go on to like go through this manual that has all this other art in it.
Yeah. The only other thing I can think of that incorporates those the rules as like fiction is like some of the weird witchy kind of things that set out the whole game as a occult ritual or something that you're all gonna like gather in a place and do a thing. Those kind of, they use the frame of the ritual of magic ritual as a kind of rituals have rules, games have rules, right? And it all goes back to the whole like magic circle and so forth.
Yeah. I was going to say this is the magic circle argument. Yeah,
this is the magic circle argument. Yes, exactly. I don't know if I buy the magic circle argument, but yes, it's interesting. And so they kind of frame it as a ritual that is also a game. So in that way, they get to have their cake and eat it too, and like have that overlap of, you're doing this ritual, and there are rules to this ritual, which just so happen to be the rules to the game, But it is really tricky, I think, to do both.
The casting stones will show a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6.
Right.
Cast the stones in the circle.
Yeah, I think sometimes that kind of stuff can go a little too far up its own rear, kind of thing. Like it's a little too, because I get it. Like there's this very much like this, like you can make this like very atmospheric thing, but you can go too far, and it's like, well, I don't think I'll ever play this game because I can't like figure out what, I can never live up to this thing, right? It's it's going back to Bluebird's Bride. It wasn't until I played Bluebird's Bride that I think I could actually run it, being the subject matter of the game being so far outside of my element of experience. But once you actually play it, it's like, oh yes, no, I can understand how I can do this thing. So you have to make an accessible object is really kind of where this kind of all breaks down to. So, all right. Sure. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to talk about. We have gone off the rails a bit. I wanted to mention a game called Verdure by Shireen Biswas, and it's 8 pages here, but talking about the magic circle thing. It is you make a salad, but you kind of choose as you're choosing your ingredients what they all represent, and then it instructs you to like cut certain things up and mix certain things together, and then like you basically have to like eat the mess that you've made, as symbolically eat the mess that you've made in the social situation by like the choices you've made about how you cut up this. And it's like, oh wow, that was an experience. It's like a solo game that you play in like 15 minutes while you make a salad, and it was like, wow, this was a very this is a departure from anything else I have experienced. But it was I was like, aha, I see what you've done here. Well done.
Yeah, I'm going to have to read that. I've never even heard of that. So if you can spell that out to me later, I'll put a link in the show notes. and we'll give it some airtime because that sounds amazingly weird.
Verdure.
Okay.
And it's probably on itch. I'll find the link.
Oh, it's most assuredly on itch. Let me just, if I had to
Yeah,
guess,
it's definitely an itch style game. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say before I
Well, I was just
that I told you about the salad eating game?
What I was going to basically go is like we're kind of at an hour here, so I wanted to ask you guys if there was any closing thoughts before I do the whole podcasty hand wavy and credits kind of thing. So we'll start with Matt. Do you have anything else you'd like to say, or even promote your stuff as it were? So.
Sure, I will give. I collected my books here in a stack, and so I've mentioned Capers from Nerdburger Games. I mentioned Wayfaring Strange from Drowning Moon Studios, and I have two more here that I haven't actually mentioned yet, but I think have achieved great artness. One is Shanty Hunters by Tristan Zimmerman and Molten Sulfur Press. He used historical, other than the cover, he used like historic art, like wood cuts from like the Age of Sail and stuff like that to depict his Age of Sail shanty collecting, supernatural shanty collecting game.
Oh, and that's
and then the other one that I have to mention,
out of copyright.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, sure.
That's
yes,
nice.
he licensed the cover from a modern artist, and then the other was all public domain. But it was
nice.
We didn't even talk about that kind of like the craft in that. It's a whole other craft, choosing the right image in that way. And the last one that I want to mention is this game called Brave Zenith, which is Soul Muppet Publishing, I think is who published it. And it is so quirky. It is the most, it is just the most of everything. Like here's it's this very cartoony style, but the choices, every choice made in the game is so ridiculous. There are only three. It's very like D&D light a little bit, but the three races are humans, cats, and jelly people. And then the six character classes include like dancer and mixologist, who's like basically making potions. So it's like it is the wild game, and the art is just as wild. I mean, it's like, I don't even know. It's a cartoon, and it's great. So those are the other two that I had to recommend that are games that use art extremely well. Those are those two. So
yeah,
you can find art stuff about my company, Wet Ink Games, and the way we use art on our Instagram. That's why we created our Instagram at Wet Ink Games. Wet Ink Games. Sometimes it would end up sounding like wedding games, but it is not. It's Wet Ink Games, and that's at Instagram, and we're on Facebook, and wetinkgames.com is our website, so you can see all of the art there. We like the art and our artists, and we promote them as much as we can. So that's where you can see more from us. And our most recent Kickstarter was called Home. You can search that on Kickstarter as well. Also has great art.
Very nice. Thank you very much, Matt. Did you have any more points you'd like to make, Dan?
No, I just nothing significant. I just say, RBK and I are both from like technical backgrounds, so sometimes we slice and dice things, kind of analytically, but like art is super important to the human experience, and we do value it, and we think it's amazing. It's good. I'm glad we had this conversation.
Yeah. I feel weird if I don't make my terrible art in some way, whatever art that is, because even though I do technical work all day, there's something that the human mind needs a little creativity every day to make it work. And I feel like this outlet of RPGs is an amazing place to do that, whether you're an artist to make art for the covers of these games, or you're just having some chuckles with your friends at the table rolling some dice. So I really appreciate you guys coming on and talking art with me, because I could probably do the whole show about art. We could just like get crazy, break down every game about which art works and what layout works and all that stuff. So really appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
You'll find the rest of this podcast, fullmetalrpg.com, or our link tree, Full Metal RPG. And you can check out some of the art that I've got up on the t-shirt sales through the link tray. You can go to that. So I really appreciate you, and I especially appreciate you if you're a patron of the show. Without you, we would not nearly be as motivated, nor get through those creative slumps that every art goes through. So thank you very much. Have a good night. Rah.